All right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Our developing coverage and our continuing coverage of the Gaza peace deal. We have been taking some looks at the Middle East, including this live look at a hospital in Gaza. Our understanding was out of the 1,900 plus Palestinian prisoners that were swapped for the Israeli hostages, many of them were dropped off at hospitals. I will say this, we have not seen a lot of activity at this specific hospital. A couple more live looks in the Middle East. Our live look at Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Gaza. This camera's been much quieter in recent days than it has in recent months. The time just past 1:30 in the morning, Middle Eastern time. We want to cover this from just about every angle possible. One person I wanted to have on today is presidential historian James Robenalt. I wanted to discuss the U.S. angles to this, the presidential, executive angles to this. It's always good to have you on. I have to first start by showing you this Time magazine cover. They put this on social media, James. It's, again, Time magazine. They say the living Israeli hostages held in Gaza have been freed under the first phase of Donald Trump's peace plan alongside a Palestinian prisoner release. They say the deal may become a signature achievement of Trump's second term, and it could mark a strategic turning point for the Middle East. My question for you is this Trump's biggest achievement to date, both terms?
Yeah, I would say if the peace agreement that is envisioned here comes to fruition in full, it absolutely would be his greatest achievement. It would be one of the greatest achievements of any American president in the Middle East, if it all comes as to what they want it to. But I think we got to pump the brakes a little bit at this point, because everybody should be thrilled and happy that the violence has ended, that a ceasefire is in place, that the hostages are returned. We cannot gainsay how important that is. It's extremely important. But the next part of this is going to be the most difficult part, which is a lasting peace in which Hamas agrees essentially to lay down their arms and be brought back into civilian society. That's going to be extremely difficult to accomplish right now, given where we are. And so we've got to just be somewhat cautious about how possible it is for this to really play out in full. But we cannot, I don't want to downplay at all how important a day this is. This is a great achievement, but I think it will only be his best achievement and the most important of his presidency if everything comes to fruition.
So I love to have you on for historical context on big stories like this. When you watch everything that's developed with this Trump peace plan, its 20-point plan, we just saw a number of world leaders. We were just showing video of it, by the way. And we have this time lapse. It's kind of jarring to the eye. You watch it at first and you're like, why is it moving so fast? And it moves so fast because there were so many world leaders that attended this peace summit in Egypt today. Trump shaking hands with just about everybody that was there. Every single nation state, there's Emmanuel Macron. We saw that the head of the PA, Mahmoud Abbas, was also there as well. There's Erdogan of Turkey. It's world leader after world leader. I'm not sure how much of this you saw today, James, but what's the significance of this peace summit that was held today in Egypt?
Well, I think what this emphasizes is that Donald Trump does have a unique position right now. He does have the ear of the Arab world. He's got relations with many in the Arab world. He's built those relations. However you feel about how he did that, the fact of the matter is he's got those relationships. And he certainly has relationships with Netanyahu and with the people of Israel, who see him as a very heroic figure at this point for all the reasons they should. So it's a unique time for him. And he definitely has the attention of the entire world right now as really, as he's always said about himself, the one person who could accomplish this. He really was that this time. And I think that he deserves credit for that. And I think the leaders are trying to show that they believe he was extremely important in accomplishing this result.
So, when you put this into historical context, do any specific moments in U.S. history come to mind when you think of everything that we've watched develop over the past week? The Paris Peace Accords, possibly.
Yes. Yes. When I wrote January 1973, my book about the end of the Vietnam War and other events of that very unique month in American history, what I wrote about was that, Nixon and Kissinger put together a plan to end our involvement in the war in Vietnam. It was known as the Paris Peace Accords. And there are a lot of similarities here. A lot of people thought that Kissinger was really pushing for this peace because he wanted to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And we can talk about that if you want to. But the one bugaboo of that agreement was that North Vietnamese forces were left in place in the South. And that was part of the agreement. The United States argued with the South Vietnamese that if the North Vietnamese broke the agreement, the U.S. would come to their defense. But in fact, that was the poison pill in the agreement that ended up, 2 years later, South Vietnam fell. The war continued. It was a very brief ceasefire. And the problem was that you left the militants and the North Vietnamese armed and in place. It's exactly what we have with Hamas right now. We still don't have an agreement that they're going to lay down their arms. And as you know, there is, like in the United States, when the appetite for any more war in Vietnam evaporated, I think in Israel, now that the hostages are back, there are enough people who want this war not to continue that Netanyahu's going to have a hard time continuing the war now that these hostages are returned. So when I say pump the brakes, I mean, there's still this important element in place. It's very similar to what happened at the Paris Peace Accords, which, as we know, fell apart. Henry Kissinger did, in fact, get the Nobel Peace Prize. The negotiator for North Vietnam, Le Duc Tho, refused it because he says there is no peace yet. So I think it's a very similar situation. And, it's really going to take a lot of political resolve of all the nations to really force Hamas to lay their arms down and enter back into society, and for this to move forward. And then we have to figure out who's going to rule these areas, what's going to happen. It is extremely delicate and difficult, as we've seen since 1947, when Israel became a state. We've had this big issue of land for peace, Israel giving back stuff, land it occupied in the 1967 Six-Day War, in return for recognition of their right to exist. That still has not happened. So that is extremely problematic. We know Iran continues to want to see Israel be destroyed. Hamas is an arm, to them. And so you've got to have these brokers who will really push everybody to get to the peace table to continue this. And it's a very nebulous thing. I don't think we can pop the champagne corks and say, like Henry Kissinger did, peace is at hand. We can just say a ceasefire has happened. Thank God hostages have been returned. And now the hard work begins.
Some video of President Trump addressing the Knesset earlier today. Trump has not been shy about campaigning for the Nobel Peace Prize. You said you had some thoughts on the Peace Prize, James.
Yeah, I'm thinking of writing a piece about presidents, U.S. presidents who've received the Nobel Peace Prize. The one that bothers Trump is Barack Obama, and he felt like he really didn't do anything to get that award. Teddy Roosevelt was the first for ending the war between Russia and Japan. Woodrow Wilson got it for what he did with the League of Nations. And Jimmy Carter got it, 20 years after his presidency, for what he did across the world. There were several people who should have gotten it, presidents. Warren Harding, who I've written a book about, had the first arms limitation treaty in history negotiated after the First World War. He really should have gotten the Peace Prize for that. JFK gave what I thought was his most important speech, and one of the most important speeches of world history, at American University in June of 1963, when he talked about peace with the Soviets and began this time when he tried to break the Cold War and, this whole problem of nuclear proliferation, which led to test ban treaties and so forth. Clearly, had he lived, he should have received the Nobel Peace Prize. So there are a number of people who presidents who have gotten it. And if, as I say, if I don't think Trump should get the Peace Prize for what just happened, although he could. But I think you got to see if this is really going to play out all the ways so that we really truly have, a lasting peace. And if we do, it will be spectacular.
Our friend, presidential historian James Robenalt, joining us today. Good to see you.
Good to see you.